and we can get started. And I'm just going to check on some of my settings here. I apologize. All right. Well, I see we still have some people joining us, and that's fine. I wanted to kick this meeting off with a few stats throughout the year while we have people continue to pop on. Feel free to mute yourselves, and I can mute people if there's any background noise, but I don't want to mass mute everyone because I love that everyone can chime in as they see fit throughout some of the slides here. But in today, this sort of final meeting of 2020, my name is Shannon Blankenship. I'm the formerly the advocacy director of St. John's Riverkeeper, but for the last few months now, I've been helping the Resilient Jax steering committee and serving as a chair function, and have been really happy to do that and see this entity continue to sustain itself and hopefully continue to grow in 2021. I want to give a big thank you to the organizations that have continued to step up. The founding members of the Resilient Jax Steering Committee consists of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, Groundwork Jacksonville, the Late Bloomers Garden Club, St. John's Riverkeeper, Timaquan Parks Foundation, the Green, sorry, this is off to the side. I call them the Green Chamber of Commerce of North Florida, but I see it's the U.S. Green Chamber of Commerce of North Florida. And thanks to Christina Kelcourse for providing great representation from them. Scenic Jacksonville, Greenscape of Jacksonville, Sierra Club, Northeast Florida Group, Riverside Avondale Preservation. And so again, just thank you all to everyone who stepped up and has continued to provide leadership in the direction of Resilient Jax throughout 2020. Obviously, we wouldn't be here without you, but we also wouldn't be able to continue without y'all's support. But with that, here are just some really big high-level 2020 initiatives that Resilient Jax has done and has, I think, should be really proud of in 2020, which hopefully we all will admit has been a year without, a lot of plans necessarily being able to be fully implemented, but a lot of sort of quickly, redirecting and changing how we do things. And I think you guys will see that we did do that a lot this year. Some things that we're really proud of, thanks to, as we mentioned earlier, Denise Reagan of the Garden Club of Jacksonville. She designed us a new logo and a new website. If you haven't been onto resilientjax.org, then hopefully, I really apologize for the many, many emails I've sent you asking to go onto the website and subscribe. But that's going to be a lot easier for us in the future to be able to reach out to people that has actually subscribed to Resilient Jax rather than just going off of my listserv. We also, thanks to the help of John Burr, who has years of editorial experience, we have an active blog where we're posting regular climate change news summaries. So these are summaries of climate change news from all over the US, but with a focus on the impact to North Florida. And so you can go onto our blog post and see some of those summaries, link back to how they connect with Resilient Jax. And most of them are very evergreen topics. So if you have free time, feel free to do that over the holiday break. John also helped us to create our Facebook page where we have 39 followers, and we definitely can grow that. And I think we're going to grow that over this next year. We have an Instagram page with 100 followers from just 10 posts. So that's really good. Most of them are flood heavy. And so that's kind of interesting that posting a lot of the flooding images has gotten a lot of people to to join us and follow us there. And then also I created a YouTube because I wanted to be able to have our videos from these meetings for people that can't attend, live somewhere. And so they exist there. But the most exciting thing that I think is new maybe to a lot of people is that Resilient Jax is teaming up with Riverfront Parks Now to hire a part-time outreach and communications coordinator, someone that we're hoping can take all of these stats that we have right here, but grow them over the next year. We want to make sure that we're not speaking to the same people every time, that we're approaching new audiences and reaching new organizations and associations to make this coalition as broad and strong as it can be. And so we're excited about that coordinator position to help us continue to try to reach out and not just sort of, sustain and maintain, which I've tried to do this past year, but of course, I'd love to see us grow. So that's something that we're really excited about. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to have Nancy Powell with Scenic Jax give some highlights of that position, where it's at right now. But just one final slide for summing up 2020 from Resilient Jax. These are some of the meetings that we've had this year and some of the topics that we focused on. We started off in January, wanted to be really specific about what's going on with resiliency in Jacksonville, and then getting excited about some of the solutions that we might be able to see through having, more money, more leadership, and prioritization of resiliency initiatives. Our March is when COVID hit, right? And so we had to take a pretty dramatic shift in some of the work that we had been doing. And by May had moved to completely online virtual programming. This is when our website launched and we got a lot more of our social media pages and tried to really make it interactive for folks to join us from anywhere. We had the Miami Climate Alliance come in and tell us how they've been doing this down in Miami. In July, we had Riverfront Parks Now and Nancy Powell again coming in and speaking to us about this really exciting initiative to potentially rethink our riverfront and to incorporate more resiliency into our riverfront in downtown Jacksonville. And also heard from excuse me, Angela DeMonbrin about Solar United Neighbors and ways that we can support solar initiatives here in North Florida. In August, spoke briefly on racism and climate. We didn't get the full presentation on that, but that's been a focus of ours, really trying to make sure that we're incorporating justice, racism issues, and diversity and inclusion in every single one of our meetings as a topic, or through speakers, or seeing how we can continue to make sure that that doesn't get left behind as we grow and move forward. Also heard from the Florida Climate Alliance about how we can connect, again, because we're a coalition, a regional coalition, to this sort of statewide movement of alliances. In October, this sort of high-level look at hurricanes, and again, trying to really make sure that we're speaking to the issues that you guys want to speak to, and so did that in October. And then this month in November, really wanting to finish off the year by hearing from our membership what you would like to see us focus on and how we can be more responsive to what everyone would like to hear from in either setting up our meeting agendas for 2021 or in topics and educational things that you guys would like to see. So with that, I just want to say congrats to Resilient Jax in 2020 and what we've done this year in growing and sustaining our membership and our support. But obviously, the two big things that we're going to hear more about are what's going on in the city of Jacksonville with our special committee on resiliency. But I want to give just a minute or two from Nancy Powell from Scenic Jax to talk about this coordinator position for anyone that has any questions or anyone that knows anyone that might be good to bring in on this. And Nancy, if you're here, I'd love if you could take over right now.
Nancy, you're mute. Sorry. So this is a contract position, and it's for an initial 6-month period of time. We're expecting it to be, or we're budgeting it for to be 40 hours per month total, combined between Riverfronts Parks Now and Resilient Jax. And so Shannon and I would be jointly managing this person, but we feel like having one person who has the same skill set. We both need the same skill set, which is communication, social media, email marketing, really learning how to, broaden our reach, get new followers, new email followers, and people who are interested and engaged. So we posted this on LinkedIn and the Nonprofit Center and another site that Shannon knows. We are starting to get some resumes in. We've gotten about 5 or 6 today, actually. We'll probably keep it open for a few, throughout this week and take a look at what we have. But the idea is that we would, that person would start early January, hopefully, maybe sooner if we can get them started sooner. And so that if you know of anybody, or if you want a copy of the, I think Shannon has the most updated copy of the job description. So I am fielding the, the inquiries and then sharing them with Shannon, and we'll be, culling through those as we go. So any questions? I see Ashante there. Ashante, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Nancy about the job? Well, again, if you know anyone that's you think might be a good fit for this, please send them. This is just again, on our blog, resilientjax.org, and the blog we're hiring, and you can link to the job description there. The deadline is today, but again, we'll accept through the end of the week, and you can always email Nancy or me. Nancy's email's right there. If you have someone that you think would be a good fit and you want to give us a heads up for a few more days or anything like that, I think that's fair. But we'd love to get someone who's, knows a bit about these topics. That's kind of the number one skill set we're looking for. But excited to bring on someone in this position. And again, I just want to thank, and Nancy, you can do the same, but the Resilient Jax steering committee members that I started this presentation off with, all of them helped to contribute to fund this position. So we didn't have to do a fund drive or anything like that from our members. The leadership really felt like this was an important way for us to grow, and hopefully we can start doing some fundraising and stuff in 2021 as we grow past this initial position. If there are no other questions, and again, anytime feel free to raise your hand so that you're not, talking over someone else or me, and I'd be happy to have anyone chime in. But I'd like to turn it over to Brooks Andrews, and he is going to give us a little bit of a status of the Special Committee on Resiliency before we move into polling questions from the membership. Brooks, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in here.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to everybody. I see you have a slide up that speaks to the Chief Resiliency Officer position. That is going to be posted relatively soon. As I understand it, speaking with Councilmember Carlucci this afternoon, the bill is going to committee tomorrow to be approved, and then to the full City Council very shortly. And then once that has been approved, actually the position has been approved. It's just some backroom bureaucracy that needs to be formalized before they can officially post the position. But that should happen in short order here. An update on the Special Committee on Resiliency. The work by the 3 committees, Environmental Planning, Communication and Education, and Infrastructure, is coming to what I would call a milestone point in the process. And what I mean by that is that the subject matter experts, many of which come from Resilient Jax and other interested community members and experts across Duval County, probably some 50 to 60 individuals have participated in this process, which is really quite incredible and pretty special, I would say, for Jacksonville, because it really has put this topic on the forefront. Besides the work of this great advocacy group, I think the visibility that the Special Committee on Resiliency has gotten has really helped push this effort to the forefront in a lot of people's minds. But the work by the subject matter experts is really coming to somewhat of a close right now. I think all three teams pretty well have their set of observations prepared. All of us now are finalizing, consolidating, editing, those kinds of things of the various sets of observations that will then go to each subcommittee to vote on what gets pushed forward to the full Special Committee on Resiliency. They will then vote on what observations are pushed forward to go one of two places. Some things that are longer term will go on to the to-do list, if you will, for the Chief Resiliency Officer. Those things that can be acted upon in relatively short order. And what I mean by that is they can go to our general counsel and be written into code, ordinances, process changes, goals, other deliverables that can be voted on by city council. And that's what's going to happen probably after the first of the year for the next couple of months. Apparently that's a relatively, it's a longer process than any of us would like, okay? To move things from the current state to the state of being in a full-fledged ordinance or an amendment to an ordinance to be voted on by city council. And that will take place over the course of the next number of months with the hopeful closing to this project by April. But the primary work by the subject matter experts, again, I would like to thank everybody on this call who's been involved in that, is coming to somewhat of a close. My guess and my understanding is that some of us will still be called upon as this process moves forward, and as general counsel probably will have questions for us to clarify and help them understand what exactly we had in mind. So to the best of my knowledge, that's where things stand right now. So if there are any questions or comments or suggestions, I'll take those before Shannon moves on.
Brooks, I actually have a question for you regarding the sort of the final, documents. I can only speak for environmental planning, but I know communications is working on their sort of outcomes as well. But is that something that you feel like will get to a point where we would want to circulate it to the Resilient Jax folks just to kind of see, what we came up with? Or do you think it would be best to sort of see how it moves in the system and I don't know, I guess kind of how it gets processed into a more, because it's very technical right now, right? For everyone, just so you know, it's a spreadsheet with like, maybe 75 recommendations and outcomes and, is it a charter amendment or an ordinance? So it's highly technical now, but is that something you think people might want to see, or will there be sort of a better copy for us to send out to people if maybe they're not, tuning in to these meetings and kind of seeing what we've come up with?
I think, that's a great question. And I hadn't necessarily thought about distributing this through a group like Resilient Jax, but that's really not a bad idea. I'm wondering though, Shannon, whether it might not be best to kind of go through this next stage of consolidation and maybe simplification. It's a bit overwhelming right now. And maybe to get it down to something that is a little more manageable and a little more appropriate for broader distribution would be a good next step, Shannon, before we do that. But I'll go ahead and have some dialogue with Councilmember DeFore and make that recommendation that we do that. Because I think it is important for the community and for advocacy groups like this to understand what's being pushed forward. So yeah, great idea, Shannon. Thank you.
Just curious. I'd love to be able to share with everyone where we're at, but also I feel like I don't know how many people would want to read
Yeah.
how technical it is. So I didn't know if there was a middle road before it becomes legislation, and no one wants to read it then either. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, good suggestion. I will keep that in mind and do my best to push that forward. Good suggestion.
Does anyone else have any questions for Brooks? Feel free to speak up.
Did I understand, Brooks, for you to say that this will all probably conclude as far as city council goes in April?
That's what their target date is, Barbara. Yes.
Okay. Because I'm also wondering how to keep the city, the community, the citizens more informed and involved about the issue.
Yeah, I think two things, Barbara. I think one, the objectives that I've seen from the Communication and Education Committee will be an ongoing initiative. Is not something that will necessarily stop in April, but rather there is an expectation that there will be a long-term plan for community education and education. Secondly, there is a lot of discussion of some sort of steering committee that supports the Chief Resiliency Officer, and that can be done in a number of different ways. And that would be, if it comes to fruition, that would be made up of a broad range of individuals from the community. And the intent of that group would not only to be a sounding board for the Chief Resiliency Officer, but to serve as a conduit, if you will, to the community in some fashion.
Right. Good.
So those are the two things, Barbara, that I know of that will help keep this alive. And obviously the expectation of Resilient Jax, the reason that we have put ourselves together is to continue to be that community advocate and keep this on the front burner and not allow it to get pushed aside like it has in the past.
Right.
Brooks, may I ask a question? This is Laura.
Yes.
Okay, where in the city organization is this position finally going to reside?
As I understand it, this is essentially going to be a position not unlike the position that heads up Public Works or heads up the Parks and Recreation Department. It will be that level and will report into the mayor's office.
Oh, that's good.
So
Okay,
it will be at the same level as those positions.
excellent. That's good news.
And I'm going to speak a little bit more to the CRO legislation, but John Sapora, your hand's raised. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure, thanks. John Sapor from LISC Jacksonville, and I've been very engaged in the Education and Community Outreach Committee and working currently with John Burr and Shannon and hopefully Ashante on some of the action steps and reporting out from that subcommittee. And I think the question that you bring up about the organizational structure, how can we really embed community engagement in this process with the Chief Resiliency Officer, and I'm hoping that our subcommittee can discuss more about that and provide some at least alternatives. But I think Resilient Jax really needs to look closely at its ongoing role, because I think we need a community-based coalition that works closely with the CRO office. So I really like this coalition. I think it's been organically created for this purpose. And I think, the opportunity is there to grow it. And I think there's, some resources that could come from the city, but I think that's up to the executive committee. But I'm a big proponent of this coalition, growing to really, fulfill some of those roles. And I think the other point I wanted to make is I thought, Brooks, that the legislation for the CRO, that the CRO was going to be a division within the planning department. So it would not be at the same level of the director of planning or recreation, but it would be under the planning department director, is my understanding.
Okay, well, maybe that is true, John. I quite frankly, I've heard both. And so I'm a little uncertain as to which one of those places it's going to fall. But you could well be right, John.
I'll chime in here and echo that I've also heard both, unfortunately. But the legislation I've read is that it's its own separate division within the planning department. So that was kind of how they solved that issue of not wanting it to be underneath planning, which it still is, but it not being ready to be a new division of the city. So I'm not 100% because you have to read it, and that's how I read it. But I will say the way that you can support it, right? Because we want to support it either way. And also you can read it yourself. These are the two places where it is being decided tomorrow. And I do know that Councilman Carlucci has said that the legislation is written the way that he wants it to be written, and he's very excited about it, and that this needs to move forward, as Brooks said, before they'll do the hiring. And so they're trying to finalize the creation of this division before they're going to hire for the position. So if anyone on this call is available tomorrow to either attend these meetings, you can do it in person or virtually, so you can do it online. And then you can also submit, if you attend online, you can submit something to say that you support this legislation so that maybe you don't have to stay there the whole time. I will say at finance, it's number 13 on the agenda. That doesn't mean a whole lot, right? That could mean 2 hours in, or it could mean you could get there really quickly. And I don't know the number on the agenda for rules, but again, if you have time tomorrow from 9:30 to 1 or from 2 to 4 to chime into either of these meetings online, then we really would love to have some individuals support bill number 2020-672, and that is for the Chief Resiliency Officer, and it is initiated and supported by Councilman Carlucci as written, although I do think there could be some clarity about the division, because I've heard both things. So, but I read it as a division within planning, and again, a creation of a division though, but within planning. So that's how I see it. And if anyone wants to follow up with me after, and we can read through the bill language and get clarification on that, I'd be happy to. That's how I've seen it.
Shannon?
Yes, sir.
Just to follow up a little bit on Barbara Ketchum's question on how we continue communications going forward. Part of the recommendation, as it's written now, and it could change, but part of the recommendation that we've come up with in the outreach committee is for Resilient Jax to actually take the lead in communications and possibly, hopefully, get some help from the city in terms of, some support and some money to actually make that really robust. So I just wanted to make sure that people on the call understood that, that we could be vitally involved in the whole communications part of it, as well as the outreach part, which John talked about earlier.
Well, thank you, John. Yeah, I do think Resilient Jax as an entity, there's a lot of reasons that we should maintain and grow and strengthen our voice in our network. And it could be as, helping in the future as an arm to connect with communities on behalf of available funding or initiatives from the city. But it also could be, more as a way that the CRO continuously is able to connect with organizations and entities active in resiliency. And we already exist. So yeah, I think, Barbara, to your point, even though the special committee on resiliency in terms of making those technical analysis might be wrapping up, the role for community members to be engaged with the city on resiliency is definitely not over. And then honestly, it could be Resilient Jax that has a role to step up to in helping with that. So thanks, John, for chiming in on some of those recommendations from the communications committee. There's also a recommendation from environmental planning that involves a community oversight committee working with the CRO on some of our specific technical recommendations. So I don't think it'll be over in April at this point. If anyone else if there are no other questions for either Brooks or Nancy, or myself on sort of where we're at right now with the special committee on resiliency or the position, I've created a few polling questions for everybody. Are there any final questions? Raise hands or go ahead and speak up before I launch our poll. Okay. So this is my first time with the use of polling questions. And one thing that I found out is that you should make each question separate. And I didn't. I guess I did all questions. I did all 6 questions in one. So I thought we might be able to walk through each one, but they are pretty quick. James, was that a question? Oh, I think that was just a cough from
No,
James.
I'm sorry.
Your avatar looks like he's waving his hand. So,
I'm sorry, I forgot to mute upon entry. Go ahead, proceed.
So I'm going to launch this poll, and what it is 6 questions. 2 of them are just administrative. It's asking you when you would like for us to continue meeting and how often. And then the other questions after are priorities of the group. I do believe you can only choose one, and you might want to choose more than one for all of them. I apologize, but we can have open discussion on every single one of these questions. So we're going to have open discussion, and you'll be able to see the results from everybody for all of them. I'll go ahead and launch it now and let you guys start working on them. And I can see when we get close to 100% of people having participated, so we can end the polling there. First, does anyone have any issues in seeing the poll? I did read a lot of tutorials about issues with polling, although there weren't answers, but because there are a lot of people that can't see polling. If you have a different browser, an older form, it might be difficult. Silence is good.
Shannon,
Yes.
this is Cheryl. I've clicked one answer for each 1-2 questions. And then at the bottom, it says submit. Oh, wait a minute. I guess I have to go further down and do all the questions.
Yeah. Okay. There's 6 total.
Right.
On the third question, it asks us about subcommittees, but you can only pick one apparently.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So choose the one that you would most like to be on, and then again, we'll discuss after if you think that
Okay.
if you had more than one you really wish you could have submitted. I apologize for the
No, these are hard things to learn. I know.
No, I know. I know.
If you have multiple committees, can we send you an email?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and because we only have how many, 26 participants on today, and normally we have, probably closer to 40 or so on these calls, I'm going to send these questions out to the remaining people that weren't able to be here today. But I'm hoping we might see some, really some clear answers that might be helpful for us. Do we have anyone else that is still working on this? I have almost 90% completed. I don't want to cut anyone off. All right. I will do maybe 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to click end polling. And then hopefully you guys can you see the results?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay.
Of
So
one,
sorry.
of the question one, the first one.
Yeah. I'll scroll through. So I'm just going to walk through these so that we can have open discussion, especially if folks, I know sometimes when you can only select one thing and there's nuance to that. So it looks like about 70% of us would prefer to meet monthly as opposed to weekly or quarterly. And that's kind of on the track that we've been doing so far. Does anyone have any comments about the outcome of question number one?
Nope.
Question number
Shannon,
two. Go
Shannon,
ahead.
this is Jim Schwartz. I think a lot of it would depend upon what the purpose of the meetings will be. If a lot of the meetings in the past have been kind of informative and educational, and if you want to do that quarterly and we can get if you want to do that monthly and you can get speakers to come monthly, that would be great. But I don't know that we've yet, or that you've yet determined exactly what the purpose of the meetings would be. So what the timing would be would kind of be dependent on that.
That's a good point. I was mostly wondering how much time you guys are willing to put into this before we form subcommittees and then realize that it's not weekly. But no, so it's good. It's good that there's an overwhelming majority, but I hear you, Jim. It's a matter of, purpose that helps in determining what, your time availability. Thank you for that. Question number two, the time of day. Looks like overwhelmingly afternoon, so that's easy. That's helpful. Any comments on number two? All right, question number three. If we did have subcommittees, and this has come up because we have had, some really, I would say, kind of very specific, topics that have come up, and I'm thinking mostly about energy and transportation, where I've kind of, I would like to be inclusive of those topics, but I'm also curious, where people's interest lies. So this is really helpful that that there's interest in education and inclusion and diversity, which, we definitely recognize that throughout. So that this is great. Again, there's an issue because you can only choose one. And I'm sure that many of us would have liked to have chosen multiple. Does anyone want to chime in on their thoughts on this one and how it turned out?
Yeah, Shannon. Let's see. If going back to our earlier discussion, if we do take a role with the city's help in communications and a blog and all kinds of things digital, what would that fit under here? Education, maybe?
I definitely think education. But I wrote the poll, so I know what I mean by all these categories. I don't know how other people interpret
Shannon,
it, right? Yeah, go
this
ahead,
is
James.
James Richardson. I would suggest maybe consideration of a communications or an outreach committee that some of the things that John was talking about could fit into, but could also expand beyond that to the type of communications outreach opportunities that the organization may have via media or something else. So I put that out there for you and the group to consider, the leadership to consider.
Thank you, James. Chanel?
This is Chanel Davis Bryan. Actually, James kind of just hit on it. I just wanted to hear what other people, the 9% that's selected other, what other subcommittees they were thinking of.
Does anyone want to chime in that said education and ask what other subcommittees they would also like to be a part of? Josh, do you want to go ahead?
Well, it's for something different.
Okay.
Oh, for energy, what did you mean? Just like alternative energy or energy in general?
Well, there's been a lot going on with energy, not just solar and some of the calls to action around solar energy, but also around JA and their energy portfolio and how their energy portfolio could perhaps be a little bit more keep climate change in mind, right? And when it comes to coal, but I think they require a specific level of expertise and interest. And so if we're going to have an energy focus, then I would like to see that there are people with that passion before that subcommittee's formed. And there could be a lot of people that would be interested in that subcommittee, but maybe it just wasn't the number one for them. But still, everyone has time commitments. So that was my thinking. Did you have another question around the energy?
No, I think I would put other also because I wanted to see like a subcommittee on maybe urban building or transitioning buildings into more system based, where you're reusing the resources that come off it, like water, and putting live plants on it to reduce energy costs and create more carbon sequestration and all kinds of cool stuff. So that's what I was hoping for.
Okay. Thank you for that. Jim, you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Shannon. I can't see the survey results anymore, but in one of the earlier questions, there was a public policy option. And I'm just thinking that that's where this committee, even in its very nascent form, has been really effective. And I would love to see that public policy work continue all the way through. So if there's not already a public policy committee, I think that could be a really powerful focus for this organization. And goodness knows our city and county government needs some push on getting a little bit more environmentally focused on their policy.
Well, thank you, Jim. Question 4 was about the focus of Resilient Jax as a whole. So I think the survey results are pretty clear that we should be doing all of these things when it comes to public policy, community empowerment, adaptation and preparedness, and engagement, education, events. I was curious if we would see something overwhelming, like Jim just said, maybe overwhelmingly supporting us being a public policy based group, or overwhelmingly an event based group. But I think seeing how, and it's not that we're divided, it's just that these are all really important things and none of them maybe are necessarily stand out. That's what I'm seeing in question number 4. But if anyone wants to chime in on how they were reading, what should be the focus of Resilient Jax in question number 4, feel free to give me your, your thoughts on this one.
This is Chanel. I see the 45% for public policy, then the 50% for engagement, education, events. I just kind of see that as the opposite sides of the same coin. It's really who you would be talking to. So public policy would be more talking to the city, talking to experts, and engagement education would be more talking to the community and the layman to make sure that they're both intersecting each other. Versus if we're focused on public policy, we could get way too much in our heads and into like what the policy wonks are saying versus what the community really is looking for and needs.
Thank you for that. Ashante?
Hello, everyone. I had quite a bit of thoughts about this one. I do feel that a lot of these focus areas, they go hand in hand exactly with the subcommittees. To Chanel's point in regards to the policy and education, I do acknowledge that we need to educate citizens and public officials about resiliency and climate change in general. Oftentimes we don't realize the lack of education of others when we all are so well versed in it. I do feel that if we could definitely get the subcommittees together, we could have those core focuses and kind of work on some annual planning and milestones. And then to my thought about the subcommittees, I didn't raise my hand fast enough to speak on that one. I see it all just really working together. The events need to happen, education needs to happen to really push forth like all of it. It's very holistic, just like resiliency is a very holistic approach. And I look forward to the work of Resiliency Jax to really speak to the holisticness of what resiliency truly is and where we need to go as a city.
Thank you, Ashante. Jim?
If you're talking to me, Shannon, I didn't have my hand up anew. It was
sorry.
just from before, I guess. Sorry.
I'll put it down. I got it. Josh?
Oh, yes. For number 4, I think all of it should be a part of what we do. I think we should be kind of hitting all these aspects. And then I think I put other on this one too, just to kind of, talk about the same thing on number 3, just have something a little bit more towards what maybe like information of what commercial builders could do and other people in other buildings could do to create better environment in kind of concrete heavy areas.
Okay. Number 5.
Shannon?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, did I miss one?
My belief is until we have a vulnerability study, until we know what risks we're running and some idea of the schedule and likelihood of those risks, we are going to have an entirely unfocused community. And so I would like to see a subcommittee on, we can't do a vulnerability study, but we can make sure that the people who can do it, City Council, JEA, are focused on it. So I would like to see a vulnerability study subcommittee.
All right, thank you.
Shannon,
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
what role does advocacy have on this organization? The city's making very serious decisions that have a great influence on resiliency right this minute. So I wonder what role our organization has in this, especially working with the city council itself on resiliency.
Yeah, and I think, just speaking to question number 4, public policy, I think has been, and Jim Schwartz had sort of said this as well, has been a big focus of this Resilient Jax since we formed. So this was really a question trying to gauge if that is, should continue to be our trajectory, or if we should, think more about engagement, education and events, or community empowerment, some of these other things. I think what it seems like people are saying is that, yes, we need to do the advocacy, we need to do the public policy, but we also need to do empowerment, engagement, and events. And so, although I would have loved for this to be 100%, everyone in 100% one category, I think it makes a lot of sense that it is, that we all would like to see us kind of championing all of these things. So, to answer your question, Susan, I think advocacy and public policy continues to have, large support from our members or participants, but also in what we're doing. There could be more though, right? But I think participating in the special committee on resiliency has really been where we've devoted a lot of our time in the last few months. So not necessarily ushering in public policy, but being involved in creating it in the first place. And so I think that's been a large amount, a bulk of our time in the last year.
Well, isn't that what the whole point was, I think, of creating this, was speaking out? Because we've been studying, God knows, we've studied it, you've been studying it how long, about as deep a dive as anyone can have. And if we don't speak out about it at this time when decisions are being made that absolutely are right in the middle of resiliency, then what's the point? I mean, we can talk and talk, and that's just fun, and I enjoy it, and I love these sessions, but that's not going to change anything.
Well, I agree. Susan. Ashante?
Yeah, as you were speaking, Susan, it brought one good point that I did want to bring up. I feel that the advocacy portion really coincides with the public policy portion, because we really have to mobilize and outreach to citizens so that we have not all the same voices reaching out to the city about the same thing. So if we can really engage and educate citizens on how resiliency affects their lives, then they can start making calls to their city council members and start sending emails, and we have those templates and things available to really put pressure. I think we'll get a mightier force from people that aren't in the green world like us,
That's a good point. And I do think in hosting these meetings throughout the year and trying to make sure that we have a wide umbrella in terms of, bringing in speakers and topics that people will want to show up and attend, so that, Susan, they're there when we have an advocacy call to action, on the line, but they may be there for another reason, because they wanted to hear about a hurricane update or something, but then we say, and here's what's going on at the city level and how you can participate. But I think being more strategic about that is, there's room for improvement there. So hopefully these questions will help us kind of fine tune that over the next year. At least that's my goal.
Hey, Shannon, one other comment real quick to kind of build on what Ashante just said, which I agree with 100%. I think the more we can mobilize the community, the better. And I think that that's a big part of our advocacy job. The other piece that I have seen has made a difference with some council members, the wake-up call has been, what are other communities doing and doing well that we haven't even thought about or begun to think about as a community? I think that for us to help the mayor's office and city council understand what kind of things are going on in other communities and why, how they how they have made things happen, how they have sought out grants, what are best practices, and what are the things that we are not doing as a community here in Duval County is beginning to make a difference. So I think we can bring a lot of those forces to bear if we bring the right people to the table, the right speakers, the right comparisons to other communities. I think that kind of thing is hugely helpful, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks, Brooks. And yeah, 100%. All right.
Shannon?
Yeah, go ahead.
You may have already given thought to this, but I think all this input we're getting is valuable. But wouldn't it be best to take these survey results and all the input that has been provided in this meeting and ultimately go back to your steering committee and then say, right, how do we operationalize some of this and change the way we do things? Or maybe that was your original intent, but I don't know.
Yes, Logan, it's definitely our agenda for Friday steering committee is taking these results from this survey that we're hearing from everyone and trying to think about, you know, moves in 2021 that we want to make to be more responsive to what the members would like to see us focusing on and strategies. And, you know, that's the goal. Yeah, that's the goal of hearing from folks, is not to have an interesting conversation, but to mobilize some of these responses and to be more responsive to what, you know, we all are participating in Resilient Jax in order to see, you know. So yeah, thank you for that. And we'll talk on Friday. Number 5, we got 2 more questions, and then it'll be open discussion on anything you guys would like to see from Resilient Jax in 2021. When it comes to continuing education, which of these resiliency topics interest you the most? Here I was kind of fishing for, you know, how we have those presentations throughout the year. I want to speak to issues that you guys are interested in, and so that I'm not just, you know, I don't know, beating you, you know, with a hammer on things that you don't want to hear about, but that you're showing up because you're interested in learning some about particular topics. And so this is really good feedback just for bringing in future speakers, which is what our steering committee gets together after every single meeting to reflect and then think about speakers for upcoming events. So this is good to hear. More on green infrastructure, great, because I love green infrastructure. Parks and public spaces. I think Nancy's presentation from Riverfront Parks Now was such an eye-opener about what other cities are doing with parks, and also how the parks are serving as resiliency features. So this is really helpful. Any other thoughts on some of these topics that people would like to chime in on?
Well, I think maybe somebody, I did only checked one. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can only do one. So I'm sure there's people wanted. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think we are about to move into an era where people start talking about climate change a little bit more than we have in the recent past. And this is going to be a great opportunity. I mean, all of these things are important. And I would have checked them, half of them at least, but I think we live in a community that's been in denial about it for a long time. So we can jump on board that for sure.
Good to hear. And I agree. Chanel?
So some of the continuing education I'd like to see or hear from speakers are people that are in our region in Jacksonville that are doing the work and the work that they're doing. Even though I work for Groundwork Jacksonville and I work in the space, I still learn about different local organizations that are working on it, and they're doing, they may have a smaller footprint, but they're still doing the work. So learning more about what's actually going on here in the community. And so we as a group can learn from and find opportunities to expand the work that's happening here in Jacksonville.
Well, that sounds awesome. And I'm going to book you for our next meeting to help me bring some of those stories to everybody. I think that would be great. Josh, you want to go?
Yeah, so I think what Chanel said is definitely true. There's a lot of people doing stuff here that, and I guess the Green Chamber is kind of trying to group everybody together So that's definitely a good resource. But I just wanted to say number 5, I think that these last 3, energy, transportation, and housing, are definitely a lot more important than just the 5 and 9% that was on here. That's kind of the future of everything once the other stuff gets figured out. So I think that we should be on top of those 3 aspects as well.
Yeah, I think if people could select more than one, those numbers would have really changed. So I might, when I send this out to everybody, I might see if there's a way to fix that so I can get more than one response for this. James Richardson, you want to go?
Sure. Building on something Brooks said earlier and a little bit of what Chanel just said, best practices. There are likely citizen-led organizations like this throughout the state. Perhaps some of the input from them on some things that they have done in their infancy that made them more successful, if you will, so that we could implement some of them or consider implementing some of them here locally. So I'm happy to reach out. There are a couple of organizations I can reach out to put you in contact with if that's something that the steering committee would want to do. But hearing from others, the path that they've trod down could be helpful for us.
100%. I want you to send information about other groups to our steering committee. I want to make sure we connect with them. And Chanel, I see your hand again. Let me get through number 6, and then and then I'll see if you just forgot to lower it or if you have more comments.
I forgot to lower it. I'll take it down.
So if we were only to do one big thing next year, what would you guys want it to be? And this was really meant to force you to select only one big thing because I'd like to see what that is. But it looks like we don't have a huge consensus on this. I was afraid of that, all these things would be great to do. Regional collaborations, we're seeing this throughout the state. Almost every region has a regional climate change entity, whether it's led by our North Florida Regional Council or it's a little bit more coalition style like we have here with Resilient Jax, but trying to bring in, more of our neighboring counties, I think would be a big initiative. A climate change march is something that we talked about when we first formed Resilient Jax and wanting to do, and COVID kind of put a damper on that. But, knowing if there was a lot of support from our participants in doing that, I think that would really give us a lot of direction. A conference or virtual education. I mean, I just love conferences, so I always put that in there. Luckily, the Environmental Protection Board has focused on resiliency in their conference for the past 2 years, but, trying to see if maybe there's something we could do to not echo that, but build on that, I think would be good. Or, prioritizing fundraising for a full-time person. I think, just working in the nonprofit space, I know that, having dedicated personnel is really, unfortunately, sometimes it's just a necessary to grow, to do some of these things that it's really hard to do with just volunteer support. So these questions were meant to challenge you, and thank you to everyone for chiming in. I'm going to stop sharing these results real quick, and we're going to open it up to general discussion and feedback really from everyone. I was hoping to hear from you about what you think were the highlights of 2021 for Resilient Jax as a way to figure out where we want to make sure we continue to go. But also, any feedback from some of these questions and things that you would like to see us consider for 2021, or again, reflecting on 2020 is kind of where I wanted to go in the discussion now. And I'd like to ask if folks would raise their hand just so we don't have too much craziness. Anna, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on that last question, and the answer that I had put down, it seems like the majority did, was about a conference and some education, because to me, that would bring so much more attention to what we're trying to do. And I've always thought that what we're trying to do is get so many more people interested and activate some actions. And that only is going to happen after they're educated about what is at risk and what is available, what tools are available. And I think a conference does that. And, you know, we would need a lot of PR, a lot of hype, but I think we'd get it because there's never been anything like that here. So that's where my vote goes.
Thank you, Anna. Susan, go ahead.
One more time, then I'm finished. I noticed that green infrastructure and was the #1 thing. And that is something I think that was started, this Resilient Jax was started. It seems to me that's what we've heard so much in all these amazing committees that the city council has sponsored. I've just been knocked out by the amount of knowledge and the beautiful speaking during those times. And so maybe this is something that our this coalition would encourage, maybe you, Shannon, as our spokeswoman, to communicate, like to go to a DIA meeting like this coming Wednesday and say, you know, this Resiliency Jax has been looking at resiliency. We hope that the DIA will take under consideration resiliency and the infrastructure when they make decisions about downtown. Because it's just amazing how many politicians, when you want to speak to them, they say, where's the community voice? Oh, we want to hear them. You know, we can talk among ourselves and we can solve all the world's problems. Unless you communicate it to the people that make the decisions, then they doesn't mean anything. And so it's amazing how many, you know, Lori DeWarrior was our city councilwoman for years, and she would say, come to the meeting and say what you think. Don't tell me. I agree. Come and say to other people. And so maybe Resiliency Jax should want to come to a DIA meeting and let them know you're what we're seeing, watching the decisions they're making, because they decide what's going to happen downtown. They're going to decide, you know. So anyway, I just feel like let's share our opinion with people who make the decisions about what happens in Jacksonville. Enough.
You have a round of applause, Susan. And no, I think, you know, when so everyone knows, when Barbara Ketchum and Susan first approached me about just meeting agendas in the beginning for resiliency, the Resiliency and Climate Change Coalition, you know, we were trying to put together agendas. We wanted to make really clear how many decisions were being made by the city, and the fact that resiliency could be incorporated into all of those decisions. It didn't need to be a specific piece of legislation to be able to show up to a meeting and say, how are you incorporating resiliency into this decision, whether it's land use and zoning or transportation and environment or neighborhoods. All of them, you know, need to be thinking about that. And so that was something we talked about in the very beginning. And I think that's something that in our virtual world maybe hasn't gotten as much, at least I haven't pushed it out as much to everybody as much as we did, you know, in some of those early meetings. So that's a really good point. And thank you, Susan, for that. Josh, you want to go ahead?
Thanks. I definitely agree with Susan, you know, and you know, people need to show up or need to have a voice, but it's really hard to go to all those meetings. There are weird times, people work, this and that. So what I think would be a really cool way to counteract that is to create some kind of like app or some type of social media type of counter where there's an issue or there's a problem. People can just go on their phone and just put it on there so that people, the city council members in that area, can see live what's happening, where it's happening, where the big problems are. And now it also acts as like kind of a data mining thing. So we can start, you know, oh, there's a whole bunch of problems here because we just get people constantly, you know, adding something to the app in this section about this problem. So we need to address that. I think it kind of brings a new perspective into getting the community involved with the government. And, you know, we're in this age of, you know, technology, we should might as well embrace it instead of trying to keep things the same and have meetings, and you have to be there to talk and only have 3 minutes, and it's really nerve-wracking to be in front of those people, and to just put something in an app really fast, I think would be helpful.
Thank you, Josh. I agree. We're in a new age of virtual meetings too, which changes it up a little bit as well, and has, I think, made things a little bit more approachable for people to show up where they may not have showed up in council chambers or the DIA building, but might be willing to do something else. John, why don't you go ahead, John Burr?
Yeah, thanks. Looking ahead to next year, I'd like to, a couple of housekeeping things. I'd like to see us register as a 501c3. We need at some point to start addressing money and donations and attracting such things. And it's a much easier, well, it's never easy, but it's a better system to be a 501c3 nonprofit than not. And Jim Schwartz knows a lot more about this than I do, but it seems to me a pretty necessary basic step. The other thing on hiring an executive director, all the things that we want to do, we will do better with the right person working full time as an executive director to help us. There's, no matter how dedicated we are as volunteers, and Shannon's done great work, yeoman's work for us, but there's no replacing having someone working 40 hours a week or whatever they work and thinking about it all the time. And when they get up in the morning, that's the first thing they think about when they go to bed. It's like having a job. We've all had jobs. It works much better. It takes you to a whole new level as an organization to have an executive director. That's it.
I don't see any other hands raised. Does anyone else want to wave or unmute and speak up for what you'd like to see Resilient Jax do in 2021?
I would just say, I think it's really hard until we kind of get the sense of this CRO and how that's, I think it's still going to be needed, obviously, because this CRO is going to be one person, maybe two people, and there needs to be community pressure to bear, because that is going to be an appointed position. So I think that's really important, but I'm still a little bit unclear, like how that role is going to play out and how, anyway, and then also these committees, that are happening. But I do think I agree with John. I think it's, and all of us here, Anna, myself, we're all in these little nonprofits, and it's hard. It would be so nice if there was some kind of shared services back end that could help some of us, because we're all struggling to kind of do everything, with no staff. So when you think about creating another one like that, I think it's anyway, but it is needed. And so, yeah, the funding component of it is like all of us. And I agree about the staffing too.
I have an idea for fundraising.
Go ahead, Anna.
I don't know exactly how to do it. And those of you who know me know that I'm always coming up with something a little different and a little snarky. I got to figure out how to do this, but I think it could be, we're fighting change. We're fighting climate change with pocket change, and have some way where people can donate coins, like you round up your bill at the grocery store or whatever. It's a possibility. People do it all the time. So we can fight climate change with your pocket change. That's all I got. James, what do you want to say?
Just keep in mind what John Burr said. I agree with that. That might be something that could be possible and catchy and would ring, but right now you don't have an entity to make that donation to. So just keep that in mind. Unless you want to funnel it through Greenscape.
Right.
Well, I'll just add that that some good news after we become a 401c3 maybe, but also I think the Community Foundation is interested in the whole subject, and that could be a possibility for the future. I'll just leave it that way, but that would, and there are probably a lot of grants out there if you have an executive director who has the time to be looking them up.
John Sapori, you want to go next?
Sure. Again, back, I think, to the organizational structure. This is a resiliency alliance and coalition of all different types of organizations, and so I'm obviously high on this coalition building out and being incorporated. And I think the executive committee really needs to be clear about the roles and not really wait for the CRO's role, but to really research and advocate for certain roles at the beginning. And some of those were in the survey questions. But I think the participation of all the constituents, through Resilient Jax or outside of that, we need to keep that momentum going, and that expectation that our government officials, both at the staff and at the elected level, need to see us as equal participants, as citizen experts, throughout our neighborhoods and our professional lives and roles. So I think it's really important. There isn't any other organization that's going to be this coalition. I don't see it. The regional council is being very helpful to the city right now to help pull together the reports from the resiliency committee, and maybe over the long term, they would be the organization that sort of is this coalition once this becomes regionalized more. But I think for Jacksonville itself, I think we need to start with a very engaged coalition like this.
Ashante?
I do agree a lot with what a lot of you said in regards to formalizing the 501c3, but I do feel that we should take the step to go further with the 501c4 because to really affect the social advocacy and policy, that C4 would make it a lot easier. You don't have to go around to as many circles. And there is a lot of grants right now for climate because it's a hot topic, especially with the administration that is taking over now. So I would say time is of the essence to get that formalized. And in 2021, I would also love to see Resiliency Jax have specific programs or certain things that the community could see and identify what it is, as opposed to a whole bucket list of things, and that's my 2 cents.
All right, my last question for everybody, and I intentionally made this really specific. You can put it in the chat window, but is there anyone that you think needs to be included in Resilient Jax that either is not participating right now or has not participated thus far? Because I think growing this group is something that has been identified as a goal from the start, right? We have a louder voice with more people, but I've heard from a lot of people things like, more people from here or more, with this background. And so I'm really looking more for a name and even an email address, right, to get them here and invite them. And so I would just welcome everyone. You can email it to me after or put it in the chat window, but someone that you want me to make sure is invited to this, knows about our initiative, and I'd be happy to craft a personal email to them explaining why we think their voice would be helpful in this coalition. I see Chanel wrote about the arts community. I'd love to reach out to Cultural Fusion and any other, the Cultural Council, any other group that, to let them know that we'd love to have them be a part of this. John, is your hand up again, or did you just not lower it? Okay. All right. So yeah, that's my final question today, is just to submit names to me of people that I need to make sure I invite to these meetings in the future. The next steps are to take the feedback from today's survey, to reach out to additional people that could not attend with some of these survey questions. And then the steering committee is meeting on Friday to talk about 2021 and a lot of these questions that we discussed today, try to fine tune them and create an action plan for 2021 for us. And also, of course, we're bringing in a coordinator next year. So we're going to have more capacity with some of these things and giving them a little bit more direction in terms of what people would like to focus on, what people like to see from us is going to be really helpful. And so this feedback we got from everyone today, I think is going to give us some good legs to start on with that position with Riverfront Parks Now for 2021. So that's really exciting. Again, if you're able to step into those meetings tomorrow and support the CRO legislation, that was something that we started off with as something we wanted to see from this group first thing well, before January, but first thing in January of this year. And so seeing it happen is going to be really great. And so if we can make sure that we continue to have our voice, heard in our support for that, I think it would be good for our city council members to hear from us. But other than that, any other final words? I'm happy to hear it before we end today's meeting.
Shannon, this is probably terrible timing on my part, but I've been thinking about it since we began talking about the CRO position. And you and Jimmy, those of you who spoke about it, said there are two possibilities of where this is going to end up, either directly under the mayor or head of a department under planning, as I understood it. And it occurred to me right then, do we have a position? Is there a better place for the CRO? Is this person going to get shuffled around and lost in a bureaucratic jungle? I'm sorry to bring it up so late, but maybe just for a second, people, I don't know the answer. And should we speak tomorrow?
Yeah, I think, Barbara, at this point, it's too late because you'd have to file new legislation to change what the current legislation would do to create this new division within the planning department. So the way it is, the legislation is currently written, the position would be appointed by the mayor, but work in a new division under planning and would work with Bill Killingsworth, the director of planning. So it is a position that, because it's appointed, obviously there's that can affect how ambitious the person is and how willing they are to go out on a limb on certain issues. But I think at this point, the most important thing is the establishment of that position. And then those things can change in the next administration in terms of how it's structured and where this person, where that division will be housed. I just think right now you got to move forward. It would be also kind of coming to the city council at literally the last moment saying, oh, wait a minute. We don't want this, So.
I didn't know if it was specified really. So anyway, that's good advice.
I agree with that. And I would just say, I think this is a happy medium in between an entirely new division or just being an employee in the planning department. So it's a creation of a new division in the planning department. So that's how I understood it, as a medium approach. And yeah, I do think that it could grow. And that was something that the council members at, several of the resiliency meetings have, been encouraged that it could change and become its own division, but that a starting point needed to be established. And this was a good one and something they were all in support of. And so I'm in support of it too, and plan to support the legislation.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for chiming in today. Again, I'm going to take the notes from our chat window today in terms of specific people to invite. Look for an email from me with some of these questions that we talked about today. And I'll consider everyone's feedback through the end of the week that's going to our steering committee. But thank you for participating and look forward to seeing you all. Have a happy new year and we'll have our next meeting in January.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.